we've invited Lucien Øyen, who's from Norway, Oslo. He, for me, is a very, very special artist, someone that I've met not too long ago. But why I've invited him over to Hong Kong was precisely for me, he represents a very different generation of art makers, precisely because he doesn't work within frames, within boundaries, and within any limitations. Because for him, you know, he can flip from film to theatre to dance, as in how we describe conventions. But first and foremost, what is critical about him is that he is one very curious person. Meaning anything that excites him, anything that piques his interest, he will chase after that and go to its logical conclusion. And that kind of spirit for me is something that I admire, something that for me represents, I think, an artist that is very, very powerful and interesting. Yes, please welcome Alan. This afternoon, Alan will share with us the work of his company, Winter Guests. And over the years, you know, and you will see the range of work. And we're also quite lucky because Alan has agreed or decided to do a short little solo, a performance of a previous piece, a section of a previous piece, just to give you a taste of the kind of work he does. But he also, at the same time, is the resident choreographer of the Norwegian Opera Ballet in Oslo. So which is kind of unusual, that he flips already in full-time work within different disciplines and different environments. And actually this whole week he has also been in conversation with Atta Wong Chun Tat, who has a company, Théâtre de la Feuille. And unfortunately he can't be here today because he's teaching. And really, you know, we Hong Kongers are very busy. But it was a very intense moment of sharing between the two artists. And this is why, you know, for us, it's always the conversation between an international artist and a Hong Kong theatre maker in an intimate process of artist-to-artist dialogue. So without further ado, can I invite Alan on stage to really give us a glimpse into his very intense universe. Alan, please.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for that introduction. I hope I'm worthy of at least a fraction of it. I thought I would start by reading a text, a short text, from the last performance I created, which premiered last Wednesday, which feels like a year ago, but it's fresh. It was a piece which I did for, because like Young said, I'm artist in residence, or resident choreographer at the Opera House in Oslo, which is an extension that it extends to my company, Winter Guests, as well. So we're kind of a company in residence, which is an amazing thing for our type of company with the work we create, which you'll see when I introduce, that we can have a home in such a signature building like the new Opera House in Oslo is. But I also do work for the company in the house. So the last commission I did was for an hour-length ballet. I say ballet because it's for a ballet company, but it wasn't a ballet. It wasn't even a dance piece, but there was dance, but there was text. So I had my scenographer cover up the whole main stage of the opera with a huge wooden box with doors opening up, revolving on all sides, like 7 meters tall and this wide. And on the back we had 2 doors, 8 meters. So we had a 16-meter width. And on the stage there was a tiny box with the same little pockets. I'll show you a picture maybe. Pictures from all of the works. And down at the bottom here is pictures from the new piece. So there's the box. So you see I had, that's Claire and Silas. Silas is a dancer and Claire is a speaker. So inside this box is a little lamp. And at one point in the piece, there's a little dancer dancing next to the box. And there is light coming out. Because when I started making this piece, I had 3 weeks in the studio with the dancers, and then we had 1 week on stage. And this was was a Sunday after the first week of rehearsal, and I felt I had nothing. I had no text, I no manuscript. So for inspiration, I went out walking. I thought, like, I need some inspiration. And then I went to a playground, because I like to do that sometimes. If I'm stressed or nervous, I go on the swing. And there was this kid. And the text that I read you now, was something he said. He was like a 9-year-old boy maybe on a swing, talking to his mother about how he used to be when he was younger. And I thought this was fantastic. Wisdom from a 9-year-old child about how it used to be. And then he quickly corrects himself by thinking he might go up again and be cool. And then I kept walking, and then I heard a father with a little child, let's go and watch the flowers, because autumn is coming, and they're going to be gone soon. And it was all kind of very relevant for this piece that I was making, which was dealing with passage of time. So anyway, yes.
The thing is that in the last 5 days, that we spent in the studio with the participants of a workshop. And, one key thing that I observed was exactly what Alan just described. Your brain works at 100 miles per minute. And you feel, for me, like a big sponge that is ready to just pick up even the smallest observation, the smallest inkling of a feeling. And then, again, like I said, you chase after it. And I'm curious, with the last piece, because I also do know that the time of the creation was very condensed. And it's something that it's also a very common experience here in Hong Kong, that artists make work in a very compressed time, like 4 weeks, 5 weeks, and you have to premiere work. Can you share a little bit about, how do you deal with something like this?
I have rarely had a lot of time. So when I have a lot of time, I don't really know what to do with it. It makes me very nervous. I feel like, oh God, we have another 2 weeks of rehearsals. I did a piece at the beginning of this year for the Gothenburg Opera, which they have an amazing dance company, which is really contemporary. The way they work, the way they commit to a project, and multidisciplinary. But they're like in the middle of an opera house, which is kind of a curious thing. But so they have really solid hours. You spend till 6 every day. So it's really long days, and I have the whole company at my disposal for 2 months. And I almost didn't know what to do at the time. But we became good friends, which had a big impact on the result, I think. So it was nice that we could really get to know each other. With the little, I don't know. I'm a master of procrastination. So I will simply sit and wait until I have no time to prepare, and then I will force myself. Maybe I should give you a little rundown of my background, like the formalities of my where I come from. So obviously I'm Norwegian, from Bergen on the west. What am I saying? The west side of the country. I grew up in a theater. My father was a dresser, so since I was very little, both me and my sister was spending a lot of time in this theater, and particularly between 10 to 15, I would be there maybe every day. There were some performances I would see 50 times in a row. That was my record. Not back to back, but I saw the same show 50 times, which I still don't understand today, but I was interested. So if you asked me when I was 11, I would say that I was going to be a movie director or something cool like that and live in New York probably, or Hong Kong, somewhere far away from Bergen. But then when I was 17, I came across contemporary dance, and I was like, I was super excited, and I just became hyper ambitious overnight. I wanted to become a dancer. I wanted to be able to move like that, and because I was so engaged as an audience when I saw physical movement. So, and then I followed that, and I started doing classical training, even though I knew I was going to do contemporary, but I wanted something to go away from, so I wanted to know what that was. And I kind of feel like my whole dance career was a detour away from theater, and then I kind of worked my way back to theater. I graduated from the State School for Dance in Norway. I came into the Contemporary Dance Company, National Contemporary Dance Company, And then after 2 years, I had already applied for funding to do my own work. And I premiered my own work, which was an hour-long piece, 40 pages of text, and a little bit of improvisation. So it wasn't really a dance piece, but it was in a dance festival, and it was considered a solo. So I was already writing a lot. I always wrote in English, because I tried to explain this the other day, why in English? And for me, I think there was an alienation to, it just became too intimate, my own language. But with English, I felt like I could flex and twist it, and it was kind of something that was easier to play with. So I always wrote in English, and still to this day, Winter Guest, my company, perform plays in English. So yeah, so I say it was a detour, because then I started choreographing more, I got to do commissions, and I started doing text with dancers, and then eventually I started working with actors, and my career kind of split into two parallel lines, where one of them is kind of doing commission work for dance companies, contemporary dance, and my own company called Winter Guest, which does mainly theatrical work with actors. And then sometimes things bleed into each other, don't they? And sometimes we make a movie, and like you said, you never know what you're going to do next. So that's kind of where I come from. I started writing with another person, another human being, a British playwright, director and actor called Andrew Whale. And it was a random encounter, and now we have written together since 2009. And we made 6 plays together. I met him at a premiere party. He had been directing my sister, who was also an actress, in a play, and she kept saying, "You have to meet." And we never had a chance to meet. And then we brushed by each other on the premiere party, and we had an instant kind of connection. And I was supposed to work with a performer called Anthony Rizzi, who worked a lot with Jan Fabre, actually, who's coming next week, with the company. But he was going on a world tour with Jan Fabre, so we couldn't work together. He had to prioritize that. So I met Andrew and I said, I have a project coming up, would you like to work together? He hadn't been acting for 10 years, he was directing. He was touring the world staging Mamma Mia. So, which was his day job, kind of. He was staging musical theater, but so he was very hungry for something else. The reason why I give you all this backstory is because I want to get to a piece called America, Visions of Love, which was kind of a defining work for us as a company, for how we started working. Now shall I show some pictures from that? I can do. Okay. America, Visions of Love was a piece at the time in the end of, the beginning of the 2000s, when I was a new dancer. I experienced a lot of works that were so-called political works. And I tried to figure out what that means. There was a lot of contemporary dance pieces, and it was about conflict zones. There was a lot of abstract movements that were kind of aggressive, and I thought maybe I should try to make a political piece. Almost as a joke, because I didn't for me, every piece of work is political to a certain degree. So I wrote an application, and it was quite kind of I was reading Jean Baudrillard, or America, and so I wrote Potential Lost in the Wasteland of Opportunity, a project about America. And then I got funding to do it, and then I had a kind of a big problem, because what do I know about America? So I just met Andrew, and I'd gone on we started the theory was we'll travel there and not do too much research, meet people, and then we'll talk to them, and we'll write down what they say, and then that will be the basis of our play, and then they will speak for themselves. So that was kind of me turning it around. I will just see what I find, and that will be the answer. And being terribly shy and not so good to meet new people. We were there for almost 3 weeks, spent almost all of our research budget and had very little. We had met with a security guard in Phoenix who was talking about his life. We met people, some people, but there was no real story there. And then I met Andrew, and as a last resort, there were cheap flights to New York, and an email from a friend of mine who said, if you ever go to Boston, you should talk to Tom, because he's a bit of a character. So we thought, we'll write Tom an email, and if he replies, we'll go to Boston. So we went on the Lucky Star bus line to Boston, which is the cheapest one, $10. And we went to Boston, and he said, I don't know what it means to be an American, but we are a group of friends who meet for coffee every morning before we go to work, and I'm sure they wouldn't mind talking to you if you don't have a problem getting up early. So we thought we would meet like 3 lawyers, because we knew he was a lawyer, like knocking down an espresso before they go to work. And boy, were we wrong. We got up early, we come into this place, and they go, hi, like Americans can do, and we were like, okay, like a little bit like European, oh, you're from the old country. That was the first thing they said to Andrew, because he was, you're from the old country. And it was an extremely eclectic group of people who defined themselves as the table. They only knew each other because they had met in this coffee place called Flower Bakery. And they were very happy to talk and share their stories. And it was kind of all the stereotypes. There was a gay couple who just adopted a black baby. There was a man who never spoke but read. And but he was always kind of laughing at the right time, but he was not kind of part of it. There was a woman who had to go to work, because it was going to be 9 o'clock now, and as soon as she left, they said, she was fired. She lost her job because of downsizing 3 months ago, but we pretend, So there was a lot of, it was ripe with the stories and undercurrents, and this was just after Obama had taken over, and so it was a really interesting group of people. But most importantly, they were willing to share. We said, do you mind if we record this? And I was filming, and it was like, of course not. And they were saying like, oh, we're going to a book reading tonight at the Calamus bookstore. You gotta come. So I'll actually show you a scene, because I feel like I talked a lot now, which exemplifies this. Because then we'd been there the first morning at the Flower, and we meet Jeff, and Jeff says, you gotta call Phil, because Phil might know George. So already George became this kind of a mythical person that everybody said, oh, you gotta talk to George. He's a real character. And it was like, more than you guys? Yeah, he's a real character. And so we called up Phil, trying to get in touch with George. So what became of this? If I go so far as to show you what happened on stage, I need to explain a couple of more steps. Eventually, we started writing. We started transcribing conversations immediately right after from the bakery, which we thought was interesting text. And I was like, oh, there is dialogue here. And we were kind of discovering this, that we could create dialogue out of thin air. And this is a nice way of saying things. And then we invented another line. And then we saw, but this is my line. This is Alan, and this is Andrew talking. It's like, yeah, but okay. So we started fictionalizing ourselves. So eventually we took out Alan, but Andrew stayed in the script. So now, in hindsight, we've done a series of so-called meta works where it's self-referring. But this was the first step of fictionalizing ourselves. So here we have a conversation. It's more or less this setup here. I'll talk about the set after. Where I filmed Andrew calling Phil to try to get a number for George. And then we had that recording, and then we were in Madrid a couple of months later, and we were like making up new lines for Phil in the other end, which was kind of close to the real lines, but we made him a little bit more camp and a little bit more entertaining. And then we had Kate, who you saw at the microphone, perform the lines of Phil in dialogue with the video recording of Andrew in Boston.
So what are you doing in Boston?
What are we doing in Boston?
Yeah.
Meeting interesting characters.
Oh, well, what does that mean?
Because a friend of my colleagues...
Oh, your colleagues. You mean there's more of you here?
Knew
How do you know? Oh, really?
And so we were put in touch with him initially, and he invited us to the
Oh, well,
to the
did
table
he
this morning,
now?
so it was great fun.
Hold on, is this for Boston Pride?
No, we'll be doing it in Norway eventually at the end of the year.
Oh, Norway. Is it a student project? Why the hell do you want to talk to George?
Well, it's a bit of research and a bit of kind of meeting people and looking for characters and situations and
Well,
stuff.
George
so,
certainly is a
it's a
character.
bit more like research, really.
Well, I suppose I could give you his number, though. He's probably going to be up at the Cape this weekend, so I don't know if you'll be able to reach him. Do you have a pen? Okay, 617-266-9129737217359973502.
Do you think he'll think we're mad if we just call him?
Oh, God, no. He'll be thrilled. He's always thrilled about new experiences. Now, listen, you tell him you're beautiful, adorable, and European, and tell him
Well, we'll
Phil
give it a
said so,
second.
okay? Now, listen, this evening, what are you doing? Because I'm going to a book reading at the Calamus, Rudy Trickle. He's a beautiful gay poet. Oh, he's a little old now,
Right.
Parkinson's, but he's a beautiful guy. So why don't we? I mean, me and my friend Lazo, we can come and pick you up at, what, 6:30? I mean, Lazo's been here since 45 years. He doesn't speak any English at all. We'll have some drinks anyway, and we'll eat something, and you can tell me all about your little project.
Okay.
Sound like a plan?
Yeah, sure. What's the name of it again, this bookstore?
The Calamus bookstore.
Calamus,
No, for God's sake, are you deaf? It's the Calamus.
okay.
Bingo.
Do you know what time it is?
Well, what's wrong with 6:30 if it starts at 7? Obviously, your hotel's downtown,
Yeah.
right? Okay, that means Lars and I will leave a little early. We'll swing by your hotel around 6:30 and pick you
Okay.
guys up. Now, you've got to tell me where you're at, and we're going to come
We
and
are
pick
at
you
the
up.
what's it called now?
Doubletree.
Doubletree's Hotel,
the
just up
Doubletree, I
the
know
top
it. It's on
of...
Washington.
Washington.
what did you say?
Washington.
Washington.
Washington. Oh, my
Avenue or
God,
Street
you're
or
so...
whatever.
So basically what we have now, we have the real conversation, and then we have a fictionalized answer from Phil, and then we have the real recordings of Phil actually meeting us and picking us up.
You know, the
Yeah.
space between fictionalization and the real was also something that during the workshops was explored quite intensely. Because in day one, right at the get-go, when we started the workshops, actually, in fact, they only did a lot of talking the first 2 days, yeah? The first day was everybody go around the circle. You just share something about yourself, you know? It's almost like autobiography, if you will. And of course, some people said more, some people said less. But, you know, right up to the last day, I was kind of amazed that from very sort of just almost simple, casual sharing of yourself, it became like scenes that for me was right out of a movie script. And of course, if you watch movies, right? I mean, that's the quality about films for me, that you know they're not real, but yet when you watch it, you feel very real. So, which is, you know, kind of interesting space that you sort of tend to work. You want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, when we started writing this, I decided that we would write it in the form of a screenplay, because to me, America is a film. I said we decided we would write it as a screenplay. So all of the scenes would start with the interior, Yuma Hotel, Arizona. Andrew Whale is musical theater director. Andrew Whale is meeting up with contemporary dancer Susie Davis to discuss the recordings they have. So everything became kind of translated through a film. And then we had the set that I've said I would speak a little bit about, which I came back with this. Like, isn't it fantastic? It's a journey. It goes like from different locations and everything. Like, we have to make an amazing set. And he's like, yes, I'm going to give you this. And he gave me 2 flat L's. I was like, oh, thanks a lot. But actually that handicap became such a strength, because we had 8 of these L shapes, which was almost too heavy to move around, even though they were very balanced, they're very light. But the best one to move them was the set designer himself. And he looked kind of like somebody called the Naked Cowboy, who is this idiot on Times Square who plays guitar in his underwear and sings really crap. But he looked like our set designer. So we had him in his underwear as the naked cowboy, moving the set around. And you would put two of them on top of each other. Suddenly we had a table. And we would flip them on the side, and we had partitioned rooms. So I'll show you a little scene in a second where you see how we'd go from abstract to abstract, but with a very specific story in mind. And the story we ended up taking came from this George character that we eventually we had a 5-minute audience with him. I can show you maybe a little clip. And George everybody was excited about George because of how he is and what he does, but we were more excited about George for how he spoke about what he does. He's a movie booker, but he is a gay man, and he's in his late 70s, and he has sex with truck drivers on the weekends. And we're like, okay, yeah, well, it's not so sensational in itself, like that some people are extreme, but the way he spoke about it. So this is, and the way he acts.
With someone your age.
He started in
Yeah, but that was 30
So he was as good at it.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So he's very much offering himself up, and you see the microphone on the table there is recording this. And there's Andrew talking with him, and I'm filming.
Anyhow,
So we spoke with him. This lasted maybe no more than 5 minutes. And he tells us a story a little bit about himself. And he goes into details about how what he does on the weekends. But he also talks about his history, which we realized we thought was quite interesting. He was a second-generation immigrant from Syria. So his father was a Muslim. And George was telling us of how he was arrested when he was a teenager after what he called a wild party. And then his father came to pick him up and bail him out of jail. And then his father was in the car with him and said, no, see, I've added that now in the car. I don't know anything about that. I've just made that up. But his father said to him, next time you meet someone you like, bring him home. And we thought this was amazing, from a Muslim in the 50s in the United States. So this was as un-American a character we could come across. So we thought, okay, let's try to pull out strands from his story. So we the first thing I wrote was a screenplay scene where his father is coming to pick him up from jail. And then he also got a house at the cave because George was challenged and he needed a safe house. So obviously his father was well-to-do. We had a recording of a woman in Phoenix in a wheelchair, which became his sister, who was jealous of the money. We made a whole story based on the life of George. So now I'll show you a scene which shows both we have a woman reading the screenplay of the scene, and then the actors do you'll see it. You can just see it for yourself. So this is the moment when...
Image of Asim's car reflected on the wet road as it passes the exit for Yarmouth Port. Exterior, Barnstable Police Department on the outskirts of the state of Massachusetts, night. Loud sound of crickets, mixed with the sound of the wheels crunching on the dusty road outside the dilapidated precinct. Asim parks his car and enters. Interior, Barnstable Police Department, continued. Close-up of Asim's hand, writing with a distinct, almost ostentatious script, his signature on the police report clipped to a clipboard. The focus shifts from Asim to show a 13-year-old boy sitting on a wooden chair. The boy, George, Asim's son, is timid, wearing 1950s style shorts, knee-high white socks, one of them slightly lower than the other, and a tank top with a feminine cut. He has a bruised and blood-stained face. 4 police officers are glaring with disgust and contempt at the innocent-looking boy. Even though George is just a lanky teenager, there is something indefinable about him that suggests Feuille. The police officers exchange glances between themselves and look at Asim, who hands back the clipboard to the senior officer behind the desk. Asim nods and tips his hat before he calls out, without looking at the boy,
George,
George pushes himself off the large seat of the wooden chair and onto his skinny legs. He looks over his right shoulder at an older man sitting at the back of the room. George's point of view. He's looking at the man as one of the police officers' faces enters the frame and spits straight to camera George's face.
So this is just, now it sounds, when I see it now, because now I see it through your eyes and it sounds really serious and dark and heavy. It's actually quite light and funny and entertaining. Because it's very varied, the piece. But that's the clip I showed you, so that's the truth of the project. I'll show you another little clip. That was my 11-year-old nephew who played George at the time. And he and Andrew, who you saw there, who played his father in this scene, they took turns about playing the character of George. And I had worked with my nephew in the past and had him with me when I did a monologue. And he was interested in maybe doing some acting again. He said he was 11. And I had it in the back of my head. And then when we read George's monologue from that 5-minute interview, we realized it was a very well-crafted text. So we thought, what would happen if we give this text to a child? And the whole story was kind of pulled out from this one meeting with George. And you know, George is a movie booker, he was talking about his life in movie metaphors. You know, he says things that were really relevant for the project. In this scene, he was talking about how he dreamed his life would be and how it was in reality. You know, it's probably never going to happen like that. I'll probably die in the screening room. The fantasy is probably better than the actuality. So all this was like after we fictionalized his whole life. This is the thing that comes. So we just want to show you a little clip of my nephew.
Drive all the way back. I have this fantasy, which I'm sure I'll never live, since most of my life is based on fantasy. I mean, I go to movies and that's all I do. Just look at lots of movies. It's all theater. It's all imagination. I have this idea that I'll retire. I'll sell the condo here in Boston. I'll be able to go out to this sort of rural area, which is not necessarily where I go now, because in the winter it's snowed in. I mean, you'll be done for 6 months. I want to go somewhere rural, not in the south, maybe in Kentucky or Tennessee or something. A hillbilly kind of place. I'd buy a little bungalow with a backyard that slopes down to a truck stop. I'd be able to have my morning coffee at the deck with my binoculars. And when something came in, I'd be able to, as an old coward said, slip into something loose and toddle down the hill and just have wall-to-wall sex for the rest of my life at this place. I wouldn't have to drive. I wouldn't have to do anything in particular. And, you know, if there was a fence, I cut a little hole in the fence or something. But I'm sure it's never going to happen. I'm going to die in the screening room.
Maybe it's better that way.
The fantasy is probably better than the actuality. I don't ever want this to happen again, George. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
Next time you meet someone you like, I want you to bring him home. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
Good.
So actually, what we found when we took this text, we thought we'd do something really cool. Yeah, cool. We'll give this to a kid and it'll make the text more exciting. It'll be weird, it'll be kind of provocative. And in my opinion, and from the response from the audience, it's quite the contrary. The whole kind of the futility of the behavior of George and how he'd kind of coasted by his entire life, being a big child, was kind of underlined, and it was quite moving, actually. So those lines that he spoke in the end was from the car in the beginning. So that was America, different visions of love.
You know, I mean, for me, you know, you began, you know, the process of America saying that, you know, you wanted to sort of try your hand at making a political play.
Yeah.
And of course, in terms of form, in terms of even treatment, if you will, it almost seems that it sort of swung the other way, and in some weird way, and it's been said that America, the Visions of Love, was almost like a love story to America.
Yeah.
But for me, I think in most times when we think of, say, a political piece of work, it's sort of, the assumption is that there needs to be some kind of almost sort of sharp entry point, if you will, or sharp moment. But ironically for me, you know, it's precisely because the political actually exists in the everyday.
Yes.
And really the bulk of the research of America was taken from the everyday. And the everyday of the people out there, of George, of this bunch of guys, couples, whatever, meeting in the cafe, their bodies already embody the political.
Yeah.
And in fact, you didn't have to do a lot to put together something that actually cuts very deep, sometimes for me even more effective as a political piece, because it is not a didactic sort of push from you, but to allow the city, the people speak.
Yes.
And you know, for me, it's kind of an interesting moment in a sense that, like, you know, now in Hong Kong, I mean, post the umbrella movement, you know, there's always a lot of conversations amongst artists, you know, theatre makers or dance makers or whatever. And because all of us went through a very sharp moment in the everyday. And sometimes it is not so easy to sort of unpack, you know, how do you deal with this? I mean, we talked a lot about this last week with Yudi and Ugo with Theatre Garasi, and it's been a year, you know, since that time, and it's interesting for me that actually in the workshop this week with the participants, I mean, I because we had very emotional sort of moments last week because it was talking about democracy very directly, and this week it swung the other way, that was almost romantic, if you will. But then the moment for me on the last day when we put all the scenes together, it was no more that kind of romanticism, but in fact, you know, you could hear very loudly the voices of the everyday that came from the participants, you know, right at day one.
I think that's very exciting.
Yeah, and that for me is kind of the beginning of the moment to sort of almost how do you deal with this kind of sharp moment that we face every day.
Well, we kind of I'm a sucker for the real, or I chase anything that to me seems authentic, seems real. Authentic is a bit of a overused word, but you want something to be real, to be truthful. But then we tend to take that and polish it, and this to stylize it. So it kind of feels a little bit like a West End play, or like or a bit kind of easy. So it's easy to kind of swallow, but then you don't really know what you eat until you kind of choke on it. Or that you can get something truthful in a, I don't know. I'm also a fan of the theater. I love but America for us was a lot about disappointment, really. And now I focus a lot about George because of little time. But Visions of Love came from the title from a song by Mariah Carey, and we had an amazing singer who was sitting there. Because that's also America, you know, dealing with minorities, and everybody we met in the United States kept saying, "Have you spoken to anyone in the black community?" And it was like, no, but nobody offered up an introduction. So we had a fantastic singer who is black, Kristen Cummings, and she sat there the whole show, the whole 3 hours, and then she gets up and sings this fantastic Mariah Carey song. But this for us, this disappointment in the meeting between what we expect from seeing something glossy and glamorous on the big screen, which is of course far from the reality that is the United States. And then some things that are uncomfortably similar. It's complicated anyway, at least. We talk about political. I just want to comment that because a lot of when I see my work from the outside, I see things that can be political and things that looks like it might have an agenda, and it's not something that I really did deliberately. Like this piece here, George is a big gay character, and we follow his life. But it was the only one we met that kind of offered up that kind of, and it was so random. This email from this woman, artistic director of a dance company, saying, meet this lawyer who was nothing like George, but one thing led to another, and then it just happened. So we try not to judge, we just try to look for interesting characters and interesting problematics and pursue that. But there is one piece that I did that is political, where I thought, not political in the sense political, well, I thought was, I wanted to kind of do something about something that I thought was important, and not just because I was interested in it. And it started with a friend of mine who is black, who we used to work together in a dance company. He's French, he's from Guadeloupe. And I come from Norway, which is quite open in terms of racism and kind of and other people. There's little of it, I thought at least. And then I meet him in 2003, and we go for a walk through the city. And because now I'm walking next to a black person, suddenly strangers that I've never met feel like they can shout things to us, and drunks can comment things, and suddenly it was a whole experience was different. So ever since that experience, I wanted to do something. And then also to show you how random things work, when we were doing America, we met somebody in Los Angeles who said, "Oh, I just love Malcolm Gladwell. You should read Malcolm Gladwell, Blink, you know." So we picked up the paperback and we read, and he was talking about Harvard's implicit tests, which is a study at harvard.edu where you sort images and category into good and bad, word concepts like kindergarten teacher, rapist, into left for good, right for bad. And then they have a picture of either a black face or a white face, and the machine clocks how quickly you can sort the good. And of course, 9 out of 10 people will sort, or take a fraction longer to sort white face with rapist, but it's quickly to go black person, rapist. And that I thought was scary, because that is not racism, that is conditioning. And that is kind of a quiet conditioning that make people cross the road when you see somebody with a hood up, even though he may not listen to hip-hop and he may not be carrying a bat. So I wanted to make a duet with Leo. And then I discovered the word flawed, and I thought it was such a wonderful word, because what does it mean to be flawed? To have something lacking, to be found wanting. So I wanted to do something on that. So we tried to pick our weaknesses and put them on stage. That was one thing. We tried to confront ourselves with our own stereotypes, because self-hatred was kind of a jumping off point. And then we went online and we started looking at blogs and video clips that we then transcribed and used in the piece. So we used a lot of found text and a lot of written text. So this is what I call our dance piece, because there's a bit of dancing in it, but there's a lot of text. And it's kind of just me and him having a conversation, a quite aggressive conversation, but a very humorous conversation. So it's a lot of comedy. So people laugh, and then suddenly they choke on their laugh. Which is also something we do a lot with winter guests. We try to laugh because we want people to relax, to be open, and then when you serve them something, they have their guard down so they can receive it in a different way. So maybe, should I show you some? I can show you maybe some of the transitions. We found there was one blog of a woman on the internet who said she was uncomfortable in her skin. She wanted to peel her skin off because terrible things had happened to her. There's one guy who calls himself a gay god who receives death threats from all over the world. And this one clip, he talks about all the death threats he gets. But he's an American.
Yeah. Okay, you guys, I got 17 death threats this month. Oh my God, it's like record or something. I should stop like reading my messages or mails or something because it's freaking me out a little bit, just a little bit. But I wanted to read you one of my favorite ones, but I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's pretty gruesome and psychotic and a little crazy and yeah, all those weird words. Okay. Okay, here's a little demo of the kind of stuff that I got.
So we took that and we transcribed it and then we gave it to Leo. There we go.
So, this morning I got 17 death threats. Oh my God, it's like record or something. I should stop reading my messages or emails or something because it's freaking me out just a little bit. But I want to read you one of my favorite ones. But I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's pretty gruesome and psychotic and a little crazy and yeah, all those weird words. Okay, here's a demo of stuff that I get. Now, I'm going to try to block out some of the bad curse word and say like effing, like, you kind of get the point, you know what I mean? Okay, let's go. You sick effing faggot. I hope you rode to eternal hell. I wanna chain you to a dead pig and force feed you McDonald's. You psychotic mother F. I hope you died of AIDS. You're not a god. Even Jesus would spit on your face.
So the costume designer kind of went bonkers on, have you guys seen Party Monster? Which is kind of, because I said I'm uncomfortable with kind of elements of cross-dressing and like wearing high heels, so the costume designer was like, okay, great, so we're doing that, okay. So it was all about kind of pushing our own comfort zones, and yeah, now this was a gay god, but there's a lot of scenes, for instance, where I dress up in a black suit to look like Leo, and then we argue about what it means to be black, and I say it's just attitude and moves, and you know, I'm just as black as you, sister. So it's a lot of kind of really bad texts. That's not a good presentation, is it? It's a lot of really, really bad texts. Oof, it sounds horrible. But it's quite entertaining. It's quite light, actually. Then a lot of the conversation is light. I thought maybe I would give a little performance of one of the monologues. I can try. It's hard to just do that. Okay, new scenario. A couple of gay boys at the corner, late at night. You know, the night ended a little bit too early. Well, this is me. Bar is closed. Move it along, you guys. One is stalling, one is lingering. There's a lot of groping, kissing and touching. You know what I mean. Then, a little clan of teenagers with a couple of hockey sticks. Those guys look like trouble. Let's cross the road. Now suddenly, we got one anxious gay with another boy's hand down his jeans, and the teenager, they're zigzagging closer. Sticks are swinging. Woo! What have we here? Now, the sound of a hockey stick against the skull is very particular, if you never heard it. It's questionable whether it's the sound of the blood pushing through the pierced skin and skull so much in an instance, or whether it's the wood clubbing against the bone that's the loudest sound. We're talking gushing blood. Before he falls over, he's lost already a liter and he's still staggering on his feet trying to figure out what's happening to him. By now, he's just a short minute away from unconsciousness. And that's a blessing because the teenagers, they're just getting started. They're laughing. There's a party on the pavement. If you've seen Jackass, you know what I mean. One is laughing, there's a lot of kicking, jumping, teeth are flying. Funny how they look so different on the pavement than inside his mouth. I bet he bleached them, they're so white. Maybe the firemen find one the next day as they're hosing the blood off the pavement. Meanwhile, we've got one guy in the street, by now he's passed out, and the other one has to watch as he's got as they put fire to his friend's hair. They've got big pockets and baggy pants, and one of them carries lighter fuel. Several of them. This is fun, screeching laughter like a car turning a corner too fast. He has to watch because he's got one of the bigger, stronger hooded hip-hoppers behind him, holding him in place. He's twitching like a worm inside a jar left out in the sun. He's jerking and trying to get loose, but somehow inside his head it's like it's all happening in slow motion. Which is a good thing because he's going to spend years with his therapist trying to remember exactly what happened so he can't forget it behind him. He's thinking, as it's happening, how he's fantasized so many times of hot, raw youngsters, them holding him down, except in the fantasy he's giving them blowjobs one by one before he becomes a victim of this half-consenting gang rape, like the rite of spring, innocent naked boys surrounded by these horny men. That's how it goes. That's in the fantasy. This is reality. They're pissing on his friend. Well, somebody's got to put out the fire. Say, that's a big dick. He somehow manages to think. But reality doesn't compare well to a sweet fantasy. He's got his stomach towards the hood of the car. His body then turned. His face is toward his friend. What was his name? Michael? They pulled his pants down. The guy behind him has got his dick out. And here comes the power of now, plunging through his ass. The power of now is persuasive. Imagine this is what they meant. This is how it feels like. Live the moment, but inside his head. Remember this morning, flash of mom, flash of dad. He remembers this morning. The professor lecturing about relative pain, and that's painful. By now there's no telling whether or not he's shit himself out of fear, or if this is how he's supposed to feel. The boy on the pavement is out of focus. What was his name? Michael? And why is he a blur? A hand on the back of his head, a slam as his face hits the hood of the car. Now his tongue needs stitches. It's in 2 parts. But then why is his focus out? He's slamming his head in rhythm. Michael, more out of focus. Slam. By now the voices aren't words. They're a jumble of sounds. But that's a happy holler. The fat one gushes into his ass like you shake a beer and spray your friends on a hot summer's day. They're having fun. And now it's someone else's turn. The skinny one, with the dirty fingernails, short and stubby but still French manicured with he slams the hockey stick on the hood as he unbuckles one-handed. It's impressive. He's done it before. It's a sequence of synchronized movement. One hand pressing against the small of the back, another unbuckling as his left foot kicks to spread the legs a little wider. Rapid eye movement. Still no clear picture. Michael. I'm cold. Shoe slipped off. Socks are wet. Michael's body. I'm scared. Is Michael still breathing? No. He's gone. Okay, that's it, right? Thank you. I tried to think of what to do, and because it's such a hard text and it's something I performed many times, it was the one I kind of had available, but maybe it was the wrong choice. I don't know. Hard. But that's life sometimes.
And life is difficult.
Yes.
No? I mean, it's
it can
not.
be.
You know, it can't be dressed up. It's what it is. Shall we move on to the last piece?
Yes. There's been so many things. I've been very fortunate to do many things. I'd like to show you a little trailer for a film project that we did last year. And then we have time for the other one after. It's short. And it's for a piece we called Avenida Corrientes, which is a famous street in Buenos Aires. It's like Broadway. And we needed a title, so we thought Sunset Boulevard, Avenida Corrientes, you know. And it was actually, we were supposed to do Flawed, but then Leo, who performed it, injured his back, so we had to wait a year before we could do the piece. So I said to Andrew, maybe you can be choreographer. Andrew is the playwright and actor, and he's like, yeah, maybe I could. So we decided to write a play, kind of a comedy/melodrama play about a dancer and a choreographer. And we wanted, you know, since we're coming from the dance world, we wanted to take all the cliches of the opera house and put a big fat line underneath, which means, of course, the choreographer is very pretentious, and we made kind of an amalgamy of German choreographers that I had encountered in my life, and then we had a ballet star, which was his partner, and we made kind of a love relationship. Where they're constantly working, preparing for a gala in Buenos Aires. And then we thought, how can we give credibility to them as characters? There should be a movie being made about them, like a documentary. So we flew to Argentina. We were fortunate enough to have funding. Thank you to the Norwegian Arts Council, who's been funding me since 2004. Without them, I would not be able to do anything. So we traveled to Argentina, and we improvised a mockumentary. So the stage performance was in front of a screen, and 50% of it was like clips from this alleged documentary. And then last year, 4 years after, we thought maybe we can actually make this documentary. So we made it into a feature film, and we've shot some more footage in New York, where we had lots of friends who could help us out. So this is a trailer for the video. For Avenida Corrientes.
Yeah, of course there's death in my work. There's death in dance. You know, dance is death. Dance is dying. I think, you know, without a choreographer, some kind of mentor, you know, there will be no dancers. But they have a lot of space inside them, a lot of space in their head. I want to get in there. I want to get into that space. I want to get inside you, especially the boys.
I take a lot of consideration about what I wear. Here and here, these are my wardrobes. You create a whole story with your outfit, with your daily outfit. I think it's very important to get inspired, to get, like for example, today I have all these flowers. I think theater is like part of my life all the time. It reminds me a little bit of the time I did Pierrot. You need to feel good, to dance good. So I'm constantly looking for this revolutionary outfit that will just change the way I dance.
You see, now I see more flesh here. And I want more. Take this away too. Take it away too. Take this off. All? No? You know, I don't like it. Why is the dance belt? Can we not have that away too? There's acute intimacy here in this tale, you know. The love of a beautiful man for this, what is it? He's a kind of phantom, he's a kind of specter, you know? This person in the underworld. This person that waits for him the other side of the river. Sometimes these things take you by surprise when suddenly the press go wild and they go, what has he done? What has Dieter Geier done here? We expect one thing and he gives us this extraordinary thing, this extraordinary piece.
And then Andrew quit smoking, and 4 years passed. So he changed quite a lot physically. So we set them up in New York as kind of the setup for the film is the fall from grace, no? Like where they end up kind of really struggling to make ends meet. I'd love to show a little clip from the actual film, if you don't mind.
Well, I say all abilities, but you know there's a limit.
Yeah, but he does this amazing
So here he's,
style stuff. He could see a video of Baryshnikov and do the same thing without even...
Okay, so
Oh,
He's
no,
teaching ballet lessons now for children.
Well, my son's in the car, so I can't stay for very long. But,
Absolutely, but we must talk about the money and everything. So what it is a whole semester, which I must ask for in advance, $600 flat, and then there's a $40 fee on the top for all the writing in the books and stuff like that, and then there's like $20 just for, you know, for the water and things. So what I'm saying is you have to pay this up front. That's all I'm saying. There's no hanging about or anything.
okay, I don't have any cash on me now, but I have my checkbook in the car.
Yeah, I don't take checks, you see. What I can suggest, maybe, is that you go outside here, turn left again, second on the right, and 2 blocks down that side, and there you'll find an ATM. You can get all the money you want. You bring it back here, cash, just put it through the letterbox there.
Oh.
You don't have to knock on the door again or anything. So what do you think?
It says here on the paper that Augusto is doing these classes.
Yeah, he's not exactly doing the classes.
No. I saw him at the Met. He was amazing.
Yeah, he's pretty good,
really
isn't he?
stunning.
But, you know, he might be around here sometime. And so, you know, why not hang around a little bit after the class, and I'll see what I can do for you, huh?
Okay.
It might cost you a little bit more, but we can sort
That's
that
okay.
out. And,
That's
yeah, we
okay.
can sort that
That's
out. You know.
so exciting.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Don't forget, 2 blocks around the corner there. Left again.
Right, and just put it in the box.
Absolutely, just
Okay.
in the box.
All right.
And we see you next
Thank
Tuesday.
you.
What you doing answering the door and running away like that? You nearly scared her away then. I was very gentle with her and very kind, and I was very generous. I don't know. I don't know what to make of you sometimes.
I don't really like New York so much.
Yeah.
This
We don't
area
have
where
time,
we live
but,
and everything is...
I'll show you once. One day I'll show you the whole thing.
You know, now with this film,
Yeah.
you know, we've looked back, you know, to also a bit of your beginning, which is dance. And,
Yes.
and I'm going to invite you now to talk as the last moment before we open up to questions. The new project that you're working on.
Yes.
Which I heard, actually when we first met, you talked about it. And because Danielle, the dancer, it's also someone that you've worked with for a long time in many of your projects. And in fact, he's still performing the last ballet piece with the Norwegian Opera Ballet. And this new piece, for me, it's kind of an interesting sort of look back, you know, given, you know, the kind of different trajectories that you've taken, you know, like you say, loop round around theatre and then with the feature film. And now going back to something that, for me, it's not just quite a full circle round, but a circle that sort of has moved on something else. Just talk quickly about that one.
Well, it's a piece, like you mentioned, Danielle, and ever since he performed in Japan with Sidi Larbi, he got a lot of connections out of that, and a lot of people loved his performance. So he was invited actually to learn to dance Nihon Buyo, which is a Japanese dance that they dance in kabuki performances. So he's been doing that very passionately, and I've always wanted to do a project also in dialogue with Asian artists. And then I met Shoji Kojima, who is a 75-year-old flamenco dancer. And he's absolutely amazing. He dances like a young man, and he looks like a ghost, and he's a true spirit. So we thought, can we make a piece about the two of them, where kind of East meets West, where you have a young kind of Argentinian dancing kabuki, and Kojima, who is kind of a full-fledged flamenco dancer. So they're kind of on opposite trajectories, literally. And we chose the title Simulacrum because we find both flamenco and also kabuki are both artistic expressions or cultures that are so intrinsically connected to the place where they come from. In Japan, it's almost sensational in itself that they have allowed Danielle to officially perform some of the pieces. So we're going to do a project that's a meeting between these two kindred spirits, because they really are kindred spirits, and there's an amazing chemistry between them, where we focus on the life of Shoji Kojima his journey from when he was a little boy into traveling with the Trans-Siberian Railway in the 60s, living 10 years in Spain. And he also has a special childhood, where as a son of a second boy in the family, was adopted to his uncle by his grandfather, which he didn't know until he was 2-3 years, when he overheard something and he understood that something was wrong, that he didn't belong. So he's kind of spent a life feeling like an outsider, and when you look what he's done to flamenco, he's really made it something of his own. So we're going to translate his childhood into a piece of kabuki dance, and the head of the Fujima family is going to choreograph an actual kabuki piece for us that will be part of our play. So it'll be like a journey from a piece about transformation, about finding your identity, and questioning the concept of authenticity. Which is exciting. So that's next year.
Yeah. Thank you, Alan. The show that will premiere next autumn, maybe.
Next autumn, yeah.
Yeah. And for me, it's kind of a good moment again, to sort of see, where you would do next. And I think we talked about some of this during the workshops. I mean, for me, the conversations between the Hong Kong artists and you were very, very inspiring, because I think there was a quality that we all found in that room, and it's something that I do feel that it represents a very strong possibility of this sort of new trajectory of your encounter with Asia. Thank you, Alan, again.
Thank you.